The goal for every NFL team entering training camp and ultimately the regular season is very simple. Win 17 regular season games, win 3 postseason games, have a parade, and repeat. But obviously that's a lot easier said than done, and that task, despite not sounding all that complicated, is nearly impossible. And in today's video, we're going to talk about a couple of undefeated teams and discuss how far they can actually go. We're going to discuss their strengths and weaknesses, why this will or will not translate into the postseason, their schedule moving forward, and what has to go right for them in order to get to the end goal, which of course is to win a championship. And remember, we're only a couple of games in, so just because these teams are undefeated for now, doesn't mean they're going to the playoffs. There's teams you may not have expected to be undefeated through 2 games, but here we are, and there is a lot to dive into today's video regarding these teams. But before we get started, I want to thank 1v1me for sponsoring today's video. 1v1me is the best platform to stake on esports as they run over 50 events per week with the best players on Madden, NBA 2K, FIFA, and more. Matches are run all day, so there's always something to stake on, and 1v1me has paid out over $10 million, and you could be next. You start by finding a match you'd like to stake on, research the players, place the stake, and watch to see if the player you stake on wins. 1v1me is on the iOS App Store or online at 1v1me.com, which is linked down below. You have to be at least 18 years old to stake on matches, and when you sign up using code FB10, you get $10 added to your first stake. Esports is growing, and 1v1me is perfect for people who enjoy esports, and again, a big thank you to 1v1me for sponsoring today's video, and now we get back to the topic. And we are starting today's video with the Baltimore Ravens. The Ravens are 2-0 after starting the year off with wins over the Texans and Bengals. The Texans win was pretty expected, all things considered, but the Bengals was not because the Ravens have their own laundry list of injuries and even entered the Week 2 game against Cincy as underdogs. Unfortunately, they lost running back J.K. Dobbins for the year with an injury, but they will be a running back by committee featuring Justice Hill and Gus Edwards, aka the Gus Bus. And by having a running back by committee along with Lamar Jackson also playing a pivotal part in the run game, this will only help the Ravens down the stretch as they look to wear teams down over the course of games. And they've ran for over 110 yards in each of the first 2 games of the year with a season-high 178 yards against the Bengals in Week 2. And obviously with the Ravens specifically, the big thing for them is going to be health. But looking at their next 3 games, they play Indy at home, in Cleveland without Nick Chubb, and in Pittsburgh. The 2 road games are going to be very difficult, especially the one in Cleveland, but what's stopping this team from starting out 5-0? And hell, we can take this a step further and look at the next few games after that. They play Tennessee in London, then come home to play the Lions, then play Arizona in the desert. And calling it what it is, Baltimore probably will not start out 8-0, just being honest, but you can see pretty quickly that it's not impossible for them to start 8-0. The Ravens were a very underrated team heading into the year and have been playing solid offensively, but even they would agree they haven't played their best football yet, which, by the way, is a good thing because you do not want to peak in the first month of the year. But for the Ravens, their game is going to translate to cold weather. Teams are not going to want to play a running back by committee and Lamar Jackson when the weather gets cold. And we, of course, can't discuss the offense with who I believe is an actual good receiver the Ravens killed and built around for years in rookie Zay Flowers. In the first 2 games of his career, Zay Flowers has 140 receiving yards, and I do think a big breakout game from him, potentially against Indy as their secondary isn't very good, is on its way. Oh, and Baltimore has a pretty good tight end who goes by the name of Mark Andrews. So again, if this team stays healthy, they can go a long way. And I really like their defensive coordinator in Mike McDonald and think this unit will finish the year top 10 in scoring and several other defensive categories too. They run the ball well, they have a very good quarterback, they have 2 good options to throw to in Zay Flowers and Mark Andrews, and their defense is quietly one of the best in the league. They can easily win the AFC North, and their ceiling is as high as the sky. Down I-295 to Landover, Maryland to discuss the Sam Howell-led Commanders. This is an easy team to look at and say, wow, they're 2-0, that won't last for long and they'll end up missing the playoffs. And while I'm not going to overreact through the second and third start of Sam Howell's career and say he's going to bring this team a Super Bowl, I like what I've seen from the Commanders through the first 2 weeks and think the offensive success can carry over long term. They've put up 55 points in the first 2 games, including an 18-point comeback win in Denver. And they have been a beneficiary so far of playing the Cardinals and Broncos, teams who have a combined record of 0-4 through 2 games. But I like the Commanders' season outlook within reason. Their pass rush is intense, and like we mentioned with the Ravens during their portion of the video, health is of course a big factor with the Washington Commanders. Chase Young has been a very frustrating player since his rookie season because he is the classic case of knowing a guy has it, but hasn't been able to put it all together. And Chase could very easily be a 13 or 14 sack player, especially in this defense. And in his lone game in 2023 so far, he had 7 pressures and 1.5 sacks, and the defense collectively had 7 sacks on the day. And while 7 sacks isn't going to be an every game type thing for the Commanders, getting to the quarterback and ultimately meeting at the quarterback will be. And this team can and will certainly surprise some of the upper echelon teams, as it's no coincidence they beat both Philly and Dallas last year. Now, will they beat them in the postseason is something else, but my point is, you cannot, under any circumstance, take this team lightly, and it wouldn't surprise me at all if they beat Buffalo in Week 3. In Week 2 alone against Denver, they had their big 4 defensive linemen each have 5+ pressures, with Young and Sweat getting 7 apiece. And if your quarterback doesn't have time to throw the football, which they're not going to against this team, good luck. And I know you may be thinking they just gave up 33 points to the Russell Wilson-led Broncos, and it took a no-call pass interference for them to beat Denver, but I would counter within this game alone, Washington gave up 2 50+ yard touchdowns. One, of course, was the Hail Mary, and the other was a 60-yard touchdown to Marvin Mims. And this isn't to take anything away from Denver, as much as it is to say, Washington will not give up an average of 2 50+ yard passing touchdowns every game, period. And in this game, the Commanders did a good job of running the football, even while they were down, and when it was time for Denver to throw the football, they more than got after Russ. Their next 2 games are going to be the ultimate test. They play Buffalo at home and Philly on the road in consecutive weeks, followed by Chicago on a short week in Week 5, and if they exit Week 5 with a 4-1 record, they are going to be a threat. And Brian Robinson could easily be a 1,000-yard, 10+ touchdown player in this offense. I like their receiving duo of Terry McLaurin and Jahan Dotson, and think they will only get better statistically as the season goes on, meaning on a more consistent basis. If Washington splits the Buffalo and Philly games, then I think they're going to be a problem in the NFC because nobody will want to play this team. And that is very much of the same for the next team we will discuss, which is the Atlanta Falcons. And Atlanta is 2-0 despite not using one of the most talented players at their position in all of football in Kyle Pitts. Fantasy owners obviously know the frustration with that, and that's another discussion, but I like the Falcons a lot heading into the season, and it's because of exactly what they've done through the first 2 games. They are very open with the fact of how much they're going to run the football, and if you're sick of them running the football, well, guess what? They're going to continue to run the football. Their usage of 11 personnel on first downs is hilariously low at just 8%, which is by far the lowest in the league. 11 personnel is 1 back and 1 tight end, and Atlanta likes to use a lot of 12 and 21 personnel, which is 1 back and 2 tight ends, and 2 tight ends in 1 back, and it's because, again, they love to run the football. And for reference of how low their usage of 11 personnel is at just 8%, the next closest team as I record this is the 49ers at 30%, and that 22% gap between the teams is the same gap it is from the 49ers and the Browns, who rank 16th, so it's a substantial gap between these 2 franchises. And Atlanta ranks in the top 10 of every rushing category, whether it's attempts, yards, touchdowns, or yards per carry, and that's a problem for opposing defenses, because I ask this question as simple as it sounds. Don't you think the Panthers and Packers, both of the teams Atlanta has beat so far, Don't you think their game plan was to stop both Bijan Robinson and Tyler Algier and to force Desmond Ridder to beat them through the air? A 2022 third-round pick who has thrown just 50 passing attempts in 2 games and thrown for just 352 yards in those 2 games. That's my point with why I love the Falcons so much. They are a kick-ass and take-names-later offense, and this is with Kyle Pitts catching just 4 passes for 59 yards in 2 games. And believe it or not, through the first 2, Tyler Algier actually has more carries than Bijan with 31 to 29. And this is a reason as to why I think the Falcons can go a long way and ultimately win the NFC South. Because what's important to remember is the NFL playoff system is a win or go home. I know everyone watching probably knows that, but if you make a mistake against the Falcons in a win or go home game offensively, it's going to be tough to get the ball back right away, and the Falcons can and will chew the clock against their opponents. But, and here's a big but for the Atlanta Falcons, it's not just their offense. Their defense significantly improved this offseason, and through 2 games, they're top 10 in scoring defensively and top 3 in yards allowed defensively. And if you want to say they played a rookie in Bryce Young who has no offensive weapons to work with, and an inexperienced quarterback in Jordan Love and a Packers team that didn't have Aaron Jones or David Bakhtiari, go for it, but this team can go a long way. Now, if they catch someone like Jalen Hurts who throws for 400 yards and completely takes over the game, then that's something entirely different. But the 2023 Falcons are going to run the ball and feast on your team's mistakes. And with all of the elite young gun quarterback play across the league, the Falcons are zigging while everyone else is zagging. Next up is the Miami Dolphins, and this is a very interesting situation for a few reasons. I am a huge Mike McDaniel fan and think he is an absolute mastermind of X's and O's, and there's one thing in particular that the Dolphins did this offseason that I think will lead them to a lot more success than people realize, and it was the re-signing of fullback Alec Ingold. In the first 2 games of the 2023 season, Ingold has played 68 total snaps and has played over 30 snaps in each game. And I know the initial thought is, what does Ingold have to do with an offense that has a very good quarterback and 2 great receivers? And what Alec has to do is he allows the Dolphins to play big without having to give up more personnel. And due to having Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle's ability to take the top off the defense and go the distance on any play, the Dolphins can run a lot more 21 personnel, which, as we said, is 2 backs and 1 tight end. No, Raheem Mostert isn't a top 2 or 3 back in the league, nor would anyone confuse him for being a top 2 or 3 back in the league, but having Ingold is pivotal because the Dolphins can run the football effectively and will continue to run the football effectively. They're 12th in yards per carry, and I would expect that to increase as the season goes on, because opposing defenses would rather them run an 11 or 12 play drive, where they run the ball 7 or 8 times, instead of giving up the one big play to Tyreek or Jalen. And eventually I do expect rookie Devon Achane to play a bigger role in this offense and to be a part of the Dolphins' run game. And when you look at the Dolphins' schedule, guys, I'm being honest here, their schedule is not that difficult, and there's no reason this team can't win 12 plus games. Yes, they'll probably lose in Philly and in Buffalo and any of the final 3 games, not all 3 of course, but at least 1 if not 2 of them. They play Denver in week 3, and with how Denver's season has started, I'd be surprised if the Dolphins aren't 3-0, which will set them up for a very fun week 4 game in Buffalo. I feel like with the Dolphins and Tua, health is of course something that has to be mentioned, but what's stopping this team from making a deep run? They took the Bills down to the wire last year in the playoffs with Skylar Thompson, and they have a much easier schedule than a lot of other AFC teams. They have nearly 1,000 yards of offense in the first 2 games and top 3 in points scored so far. They also won 2 games on the road in LA and in Foxborough. Now, the Dolphins obviously aren't unbeatable, as nobody is, but a healthy Dolphins team belongs in the top tier AFC conversation. I hope you enjoyed today's video. Once again, thank you to 1v1me for sponsoring, and if you enjoyed, please like and subscribe, as only about 23% of people watching are subscribed and makes a massive difference. Until the next video, please be safe and have a great day. Love you guys.